Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and welcome to part 8 of my review/game diary for the Pulp Cthulhu campaign, The Two-Headed Serpent. Today's gripping episode will cover Chapter 8, Snake Island. The chapter itself is short, only 15 pages, and is designed to close up any final details before the characters go off to the grand finale in Chapter 9. Because of that, it's going to play out wildly differently for every group out there, just depending on what all they've done in their campaign and what they haven't, as well as which of the villain factions is in charge at this point. This could be a long adventure, this could be a short adventure. Now for our group, we were able to complete the entire Snake Island adventure in only half a session. That was with us taking our time.
Yeah, that's a bit of a misleading statement right there.
How do you mean? We did everything in the adventure and it only took us half a session.
Half a session? The truth is that we completed both chapters 8 and 9 in a single epic 12-hour gaming marathon. It was amazing and fun, and we had a total blast. But the first half of that, Snake Island, that thing had 4 combats and a chase scene, and it took us the better part of 5 hours in order to complete it. So don't be spouting off that they're going to be able to do it in just half a session, because they're going to think that means 1 to 2 hours, and that was not the case for us at all.
Yeah, fair enough. For today's adventure, our heroes will be Buck Meyer, Jane Darling, Boba, and JJ, fresh from their mission and back from Calcutta. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop here, otherwise you're going to ruin the surprise. But definitely send your game masters this way for tips and suggestions on how to run the Two-Headed Serpent for you and your group. Okay, keepers, let's get to work. The Snake Island adventure is designed to wrap up any loose ends before the heroes go charging off to the land of Mu in Chapter 9 for the grand finale to the whole campaign. So depending if you've given them all the handouts from New York, or if you haven't determined yet who the final villain is, or if your PCs need any sort of last-minute armaments or supplies before they go off to Mu, this is your last chance. Because the mileage may vary for group to group, some groups might breeze through this and not really touch on Snake Island adventure at all. Others might spend a very long session on it. It all completely depends on what you've done before this session and what happens during this session. The plot is that Caduceus has set up a base of operations in Santos, Brazil. This is similar to different offices that they have spread out throughout the world. But the real reason that they chose Santos is because of its proximity to Snake Island, a small Atlantic island that is infested with thousands of golden lancehead vipers, which by the way is a totally real place. Thousands of years ago, during the second Serpent Person Empire, the Serpent people had broken down into 3 religious factions: the followers of Yig, the followers of Desagawa, and the followers of Gantanathoa, which I'm probably mispronouncing here. Those are the same 3 factions that appear in the campaign. Now, the Citadel on the lost continent of Mu was the center of all of this, with highly advanced technology and some sort of doomsday device. But before any of the 3 warring factions could activate this doomsday device, the Elder Things that were also living on Mu decided to attack it, and during that battle, the entire continent of Mu was transported to its own pocket dimension and away from Earth. Now, the PCs should have pieced some of this together. Maybe they've pieced all of it together, maybe they haven't. But the important part is that Snake Island is the closest physical location on the planet Earth to the lost continent of Mu, and that is why Caduceus has set themselves up in Santos, is so they can have access to it. Now, the reason that Caduceus hasn't already opened up the portal and gated into the land of Mu is that the way there is guarded by several Loigors who are protecting anyone from entering it, and they've slaughtered all of the Caduceus agents that have tried to get inside. And the only way past these creatures is with the Cobra Crown. So all 3 factions have been hunting for the Cobra Crown, which is finally discovered in the last chapter in Calcutta, India, and where our campaign Tyrannish used the crown to pull those Loigor out of Mu through the portal. And once that was done, the path to Mu was completely left unguarded. So now every surviving faction in the campaign is racing to Snake Island in order to go through the gateway in order to get to Mu and the Lost Citadel. Now in Calcutta, the PCs should have hopefully eliminated 1 or 2 of the factions involved, leaving the third as the final villain. So for our campaign, Tyrannish is dead, as well as Joshua Meadham, leaving Rose Meadham and the Inner Knight, the followers of Desagawa, as the final enemy for our campaign. But even though Joshua Meadham is dead, caduceus still has a small part to play in the Snake Island chapter.
Holy crap, enough about the backstory. Let's get on to this adventure.
Fine. I just hadn't actually given what the whole plot of the campaign was, and people are beginning to ask about that. Now, our adventure is opening as the player characters are flying across the Pacific, trying to get from India to Brazil. They receive a radio message from Philip Connors, who is working as a mole inside the caduceus offices as everything is just crashing down around him. He reports that Joshua Meadham is believed to be dead, a fact that the player characters know for certain because they're the ones who killed him. He says that Dr. G has taken a seaplane down to Santos, Brazil, where caduceus has pumped a ton of money and resources into over the past few months. The head of the Santos office is Dr. Sequeira, which I'm probably mispronouncing, so I'm only going to refer to him as Dr. C from now on. Now, Connors knows very little bit about Dr. C, but because Connors is afraid for his life, he tells the PCs that he's about to go into hiding, and this is going to be the last message that they get from him, so he just wishes them good luck, and hopefully they'll be able to save the world.
Oh, you are not giving that conversation justice. Connors was a little bit overly enthusiastic with all the cloak and dagger double agent sort of thing that he was doing for us, so he started referring to himself by the handle Snake Charmer, and he gave all of us nicknames as well, such as Jane, she was Black Mamba. So we started getting these radio signals that were all Snake Charmer to Black Mamba, the rooster has left the hen house, which would have been fine and great had he bothered telling us that we were going to be speaking in code and what that code even was. So from our end, it was like we were getting radio transmissions from Crazy Town, and it took us quite a while just to figure out what in the hell he was talking about.
The heroes arrive in Santos. We receive both a keeper and a player map for this. Arriving in Meadham's personal plane, and they're worried that caduceus might be looking for them, this left the heroes a bit paranoid. So they did see it when a kid started staring at them from across the street, glanced at some sort of piece of paper in his hand, and then started running away. And this led to a fantastic chase to the city as the heroes are kind of charging after this kid, trying to stop him before this kid's able to report to whoever it is that the player characters have arrived.
Oh yeah, that chase scene was a hell of a lot better than the one that we had back at Calcutta, because our motivation to join in the chase was crystal clear. So once we finally caught this kid and we wrestled him to the ground and we were all like, who sent you? Who are you working for? And we found out that yes, he had been paid to report our arrival to somebody that sounded a hell of a lot like Dr. G. But that was also the time that we noticed some other kids down some other streets that were running the same direction. And that's when we knew that we had been made.
After doing a bit of research on Snake Island, the player characters discovered that all of the anti-venom for the golden lancehead vipers has been purchased from around the city, so it's not available anywhere. Also, they discovered that in order to get to the island, because it's about 100 miles offshore, they're going to need to procure a boat or a plane or some other means of getting there. Because they didn't have any options left, the players decided to just go ahead and check out the caduceus office in Santos. Now, Bobo went first, using his stealth to circle the building. There, in the back, he discovered crates of the anti-venom just stacked up there and left to rot, but not available for anyone else to have.
Okay guys, I got the anti-venom right here, but we still ain't got no way of getting to Snake Island. Now I saw Dr. C inside that office, but didn't see any sign of Dr. G in there. And we ain't got no way of knowing whether Dr. C is actually evil, because he might have just been duped like we were. So here's my idea. Let's go right into that office and give him a surprise.
Strolling into the building, the player characters found Dr. C in his office. Jane noticed the lingering odor of several serpent people inside the building, which was confirmed once several serpent people emerged from the back and began attacking the player characters. Dr. C sucker-punched Buck with a Fist of Yog-Sothoth spell and hurled him through a wall. Meanwhile, JJ and Boba fought off the serpent people while Jane took care of Dr. C. Through investigation and interrogation once all this was over, the PCs learned that Caduceus was still planning on going through the portal to Mu in order to activate their plan of using biomechanical flies to distribute some sort of humanity-destroying drug across the world, and that they were currently finishing up loading a ship with the remaining serpent people and drug and everything like that in order to get to Snake Island, and most of those people were already on board. The PCs just managed to get there just in time. Dr. G's seaplane was docked up at the opposite side of the city, and Dr. G's personal mission in Santos was to eliminate the heroes for killing his boss. Now, Keepers, if your heroes haven't already discovered all the handouts from the New York chapter, you can go ahead and have them find them here in a drawer, in a safe, or something like that. Our heroes raced to the North Docks where Dr. G's seaplane was located, planning to steal it for themselves. But once they arrived, a street kid approached and handed Buck a slip of paper with a green eye drawn on it. And then the eye blinked.
Whoa, that was weird. Did you see that? Let me make a mythos check. Aw, crap. Somebody just cast a spell on me.
Safely hidden from view, Dr. G enacts the Coils of Yig spell, which causes the shadow of anyone that looked at this note. The shadow is going to animate and it's going to start strangling them to death. However, the kid that Dr. G paid to deliver this note to the heroes, he glanced at the note before he handed it to them. So this kid is the first victim where a shadow seems to come alive and start strangling the kid to death. Now Buck sprang into action, pulling this kid into the back of a car and burying him beneath a big pile of clothes that they was pulling out of their luggage, that way to hide the kid from his own shadow. Using his tracking, Boba quickly figured out which shack Dr. G was using to hide and do his chanting to do this killing spell. But before he could kill the evil sorcerer, Dr. G hit Boba with a Fist of Yog-Sothoth spell, hurling him through a shed. Jane then stepped in and executed Dr. G with extreme prejudice.
That's for lying to us, and that's for trying to kill us, and that's for turning me into a scaly freak!
With Dr. G dead, the player characters were about to load onto the seaplane and head off to Snake Island when JJ said,
Look guys, I don't want to head on over to Snake Island right now while there is still an entire boatload with the serpent people that are about to leave and show up on our butts. So I say we take care of those guys now. So here's my plan. I have a ton of dynamite. And that's pretty much my plan. What do you think?
The heroes then raced down to the South Docks where the caduceus ship was still loading, and then using his demolitions, his stealth, and his disguise skills, JJ snuck aboard the ship and placed a time bomb of dynamite on the location on the ship that he considered to be the most effective and the most damaging. Once the bomb was set, the PCs then raced back to the North Docks, loaded up on the seaplane, and flew out of Santos. On their way, they then swung by the ship, which was already setting sail. The bomb detonated, and between the massive amount of dynamite that JJ used and the perfect placement, the ship exploded and quickly sank, killing all of the caduceus serpent people on board.
Yeah, I love it when a plan comes together, especially when that plan involves dynamite.
Now, Keepers, there are several ways that your players might reach Snake Island in your own game. They can charter or steal a boat, they can stow away or steal this caduceus ship, or if they have one or they can find one, they can use a seaplane. Now, I decided early on that Meadham's private plane that they had gotten from him in India would not be a seaplane. That way the player characters had to stop in Santos and not just bypass Santos altogether and go straight to Snake Island and end up at the end of the campaign not being fully prepared. But the reason I then added a seaplane once they arrived at Santos is because Jane is one hell of a great pilot, and I would prefer them to use their skills that they have and let the pilot be a pilot. Now, as I said, Snake Island is a very real place, and it's extremely interesting. Prior to running this adventure, Scott Dorward tipped me off about a documentary about the island, and I strongly recommend that any keepers out there check this documentary out before you run this adventure in order to better describe what Snake Island is like. Once the heroes arrive at Snake Island, they'll encounter Caduceus's real security system here. A monstrous, genetically engineered snake that will attack, even leaping out from the water and taking down any low-flying planes. Now this thing is huge. It's 6 feet in diameter and over 100 feet long. Now Keepers, I suggest that maybe you should foreshadow this snake earlier on in the campaign. When the PCs go down into the labs beneath the Meadham building, they're going to see signs that they've been testing on making animals larger. And they can find several files and notes about something to do with the giant sea serpent, different measurements and all sorts of stuff like that, but then not find out any information as what actually happened to this giant sea serpent that Caduceus seems to have made. And then when you get to the Snake Island adventure, you get to show them what happened to that giant sea serpent. So this is something you'll need to put a little earlier into the adventure, but I think it could work out pretty well for you. Now, thankfully, when this thing jumped out and tried to bite the ship, Jane was one hell of a pilot, and she was able to do a pilot roll as a dodge and get out of the way of that. The player characters at this point tried shooting down at this giant snake, but it then dove too deep below the surface and rendering their bullets completely ineffective. But at this point, Jane had an idea.
Okay, boys, strap yourselves in next to the open doors. Buck, you go out that front nose hatch. I'm going to dive down low, and when that thing comes up to attack, I'm going to evade and you're going to shoot it. This plan can't possibly go badly.
So armed with rifles and laser stabs, the player characters all got into position out the door and out the little hatch in the nose of the plane, and then Jane started diving really low to the surface and sort of skimming the water. And then when that snake came out of the water like it was going to bite the plane, Jane would bank out of the way, making her pilot check as a dodge check, and then while the snake was exposed, the player characters, the rest of them, would shoot this thing trying to kill it. It was amazing. It took her 3 dives before they managed to do enough damage to kill it, but it was a lot like they were fly fishing, except they were the actual lure.
Boom! Now that is some good flying, if I say so myself.
The journey across the island itself is pretty straightforward. The player characters are going to have to make several spot checks in order to notice snakes before those snakes have a chance to bite them, but eventually the heroes are going to make it up to the lighthouse where the caduceus camp is located. Now, because Rose Meadham was now our principal villain, the player characters discovered that Rose had already beaten her there, and the caduceus serpent people at the camp had all been wiped out, so there's now corpses everywhere and some signs of a battle. There were also several empty transport spheres that Rose and her goons had used to get here on their own. And there was also a lot of black slime inside 2 of those spheres, as well as on some of the corpses, so that was their clue that she was going to be using formless spawn as some of her allies. Now, one thing that I did add here is I added a pair of the serpent hounds from chapter 1 because the Internight had used those before, and that was the last time we had seen them. So Rose had left these serpent hounds here as a way of guarding the portal after she had gone through it, in case any caduceus members or the player characters had arrived and might close the portal or something behind her. I also added an empty crate that was inside the lighthouse that was clearly marked and had a nice cutout for the serpent scepter, but Rose had already taken the serpent scepter out of it before she had gone through the portal and into Mu. Now, keepers might want to have a few scattered weapons here that the heroes can pick up if they need them, because they might be running low on ammo after shooting that giant snake or any battling they do here. And go ahead and place any handouts from New York that you have not already given the player characters. Go ahead and have them here, that way the player characters can have access to them. Maybe if they haven't had enough fights in this adventure recently, you could add a few more Internight mooks that are kind of located here trying to protect the portal while Rose had already gone through it. Finally, if the player characters did not get one from Calcutta, somewhere in this entire adventure, either at the caduceus office, on the ship, Dr. G's airplane, if you decide to add that like I did, the player character should discover a half-Durang device, the nuclear bomb, the Mythos Power nuclear bomb, because the player characters are probably going to need that before the end of the campaign. And once everything is set up, they can step through the open portal, the world shifts around them, and that is the end of the Snake Island chapter. Overall, we had a lot of fun with the Snake Island chapter. However, because there are so many variables as to where everyone's individual campaign is going to be at this point, mileage is going to greatly vary group to group. Your players might skip portions of this adventure altogether, bypassing the caduceus office or bypassing the ship, and maybe they just head straight to Snake Island and not even bother stopping in Santos at all. So keepers, be on your toes and make sure that you drop any remaining clues that the player characters haven't had throughout this campaign. Go ahead and put them wherever the player characters go, that way they have them before we enter Chapter 9. Now, my only complaint with this section, and this is me getting really, really nitpicky here, is that I'd like to have had a floor plan for the caduceus ship. Not all of us know what a 1930s steamship floor plan looked like, and that could be really helpful if the player characters either decide to stow away or steal the ship for themselves. Well, that is it for this episode, so join us next time for the thrilling conclusion and the final chapters. They explore the lost continent of Mu, and not all of our heroes are going to make it out alive.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And of course, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Till next time, heroes, you have a great day. I can't believe you left out the part where we made our swanky, snake-bite-proof suits. We looked like a bunch of deep-sea divers wandering through the jungle. It was hilarious.